we're keeping our promise to you, our commitment to America. The parents will have a say in their kids' education.
Coming up on Talking Points, House Republicans pass a new education bill. We'll detail what's included and its impacts on our lives.
Our banking system is sound and resilient with strong capital and liquidity.
Plus, in the aftermath of the Silicon Valley bank collapse, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell continues to show optimism. We'll have the latest on the recent banking troubles facing the U.S.
Today, we have more than 1 billion monthly active users around the world, including over 150 million in the United States.
And TikTok's CEO testifying in front of Congress. More on the social media platform's future and the potential ban for us here in the U.S. All that and more. Talking Points starts right now.
Good evening and welcome into Talking Points. I'm Jake Morel.
And I'm Chilekasi, Adele. We start off tonight's show with the latest news regarding the New York State budget proposal. Former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg has given over $5 million in campaign funds to Governor Kathy Hochul as she pushes to pass her 2023 budget. The budget proposed by Hochul and her administration would fund the creation of more charter schools, low-income housing, and greater bail reform. Bloomberg's millions in funds have gone towards ad campaigns and social media posts lobbying in favor of passing the budget request. The deadline to pass this year's budget fast approaching. That's on April 1st.
And earlier today, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced he would delay his plans for judicial change, causing partisan and civil unrest in Jerusalem. His decision to delay an effort to de-escalate protests. The legislation was to remake the courts, which would give Netanyahu's government more control over choosing Supreme Court judges and over the court's authority. Supporters of the judicial overhaul are protesting simultaneously as anti-government protests rage throughout the country.
6 people are dead tonight after a shooting at a Christian school in Tennessee. 3 of those are children. Biden called the situation heartbreaking and said gun violence is a problem, quote, ripping at the very soul of the nation. He also pushed for legislative action.
You know, the shooter in this situation reportedly had 2 assault weapons and a pistol, 2 AK-47. So I call on Congress again to pass my assault weapons ban. It's about time that we begin to make some more progress.
Tennessee Republican Senator Bill Hagerty also said he was, quote, devastated and heartbroken and commended law enforcement for their, quote, heroic actions. And last week, the House passed the Parents' Bill of Rights Act in a 213 to 208 vote. The Republican-backed bill aims to increase parental rights in the classroom. NY22 Representative Brandon Williams took to social media this week to give his support of the bill's passing. He said, quote, I voted along with my majority of colleagues to give parents nationwide a voice and a choice in determining their children's education in passing the bill. We are affirming parents' rights to be heard, to know what it is being taught in schools, and to have children's privacy protected.
Let's talk national impact of this bill. We bring in senior analyst Olivia Maniscalco. So Olivia, what exactly does this bill do?
Thanks, Shalay and Jake. The bill essentially gives parents a much more intimate look at exactly what is being taught in their children's school. The bill applies to American schools with federal funding. They must provide children with a list of books and reading materials available in the school library, as well as post curriculum publicly. Elementary and middle schools have to get parental consent before changing a minor's gender markers, pronouns, or preferred name on any school form, or before allowing a child to change their sex-based accommodations, including locker rooms or bathrooms. The bill also affirms parents' rights to address school boards and receive information about violent activity in their child's school. Barring 5 Republicans that voted against it, it is widely a polarizing bill between the 2 parties. Because Democrats are against this bill, it is unlikely it will pass in Senate. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer stated the following in a Senate meeting this past Thursday.
The House Republican school control bill is Orwellian to the core, and it will not see the light of day here in the Senate. If passed, schools across the nation would be forced to adhere to a panoply of federal regulations that take power away from parents
Democrats argue that the bill would just allow the government to further control school curriculum, while Republicans in support claim the bill would give parents a larger say in the kids' curriculum.
Olivia, I want to ask you, has this bill been a long time coming? How long have parents' rights in terms of school been a cause for contention in the government?
Thanks, Shirley. Yes, this has always been an issue, but it was definitely accelerated because of the pandemic. Parents got pretty energized about this issue because schools could determine whether or not their children were wearing masks in school or had to get vaccinated. In 2021, the gubernatorial campaign of Glenn Youngkin in Virginia, where he won, actually the center of his campaign was centered around parents' rights in schools. So now this is something that Republicans have been caring more about, with issues such as critical race theory. That has been something that has been talked about a lot in the past couple of years, whether or not that should be taught in schools, as well as issues surrounding gender and sex. But Democrats argue that the bill could give a legal basis for books being banned in schools, which they think is censorship.
And Olivia, is there any possibility of a similar bill being passed in the future that the Democrats could be on board with?
Yeah, definitely, because there are a couple parts of the bill that Democrats agree with, such as parents knowing when violence is happening in their children's school. Or there is also a part of the bill that talks about that bans schools from selling children's data for commercial purposes. So those parts Democrats agree with. But I do not think that that the Senate majority Democrats would get on board with a bill that allows parents to see their kids' curriculum, as well as parents give consent before children do things such as change their pronouns in school. So yes, but it would have to be a largely scaled back bill. But that's all the time I have for you guys right now. Back to you.
Olivia, thank you. Earlier this week, a federal appeals court blocked President Biden's plan to require vaccinations for all federal workers. The blocking allows unvaccinated federal employees to continue to work without fear of being fired.
Talking Points analyst Ronnie Perillo is in studio to tell us more about why the requirement was unable to be approved. Ronnie, what are some of the legal details from this case?
Well, Jake, thank you. President Biden and his administration were dealt a major blow this week after a federal appeals court ruled his COVID-19 vaccine mandate for federal workers cannot go forward. Now, the decision was made on Thursday by the 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans. The court has rejected that Biden's powers, are similar to an executive of a private company, which can mandate employees to get vaccinated. The case was brought forward by a 6,000-member organization called the Feds for Medical Freedom. Now, they claim the mandate was outside the president's power in the first place. The decision reversed an earlier one from September of 2021, where the president issued an executive order forcing nearly 3.5 million federal workers to get a COVID-19 shot. Now, the president's order did allow for medical and religious exemptions at the time. The order played a game of back and forth, however, as it was stopped by a Trump-appointed Texas district judge last January, but then resumed by a panel from that same 5th U.S. Circuit Court in Louisiana last April. And on Thursday, 10 of the court's 16 judges ruled that Biden's order was unconstitutional and had no legal grounds to stand on. Now, you might remember last January when the U.S. Supreme Court struck down a mandate by the White House that directed those working at any private sector business with more than 100 employees to receive the shot. And opponents of Biden's vaccine mandates, and of course this most recent one, call these rulings a win. The White House is still stressing that vaccines are the best way to slow the spread of COVID-19, which does seem to be slowing down. Cases nationally, guys, have been decreasing since January.
And Ronnie, we've seen headlines like this since vaccines began rolling out 2 years ago. Cities, states, companies, all requiring them. What will these mandates look like in the future?
Well, Jake, I think that we're going to see them wane away as the national emergency for COVID-19 will be ending on May 11th. Now, 95% of federal workers are already vaccinated. We can see this obviously by federal data, but also look at large places like New York City. They've actually relaxed their mandates. They were some of the most stringent places in the beginning of the pandemic and when these shots first began to roll out. So I think between that and then the fact that, you're going to have to start paying for these vaccines once that national emergency ends, that's going to be something that is no longer free to Americans. So I do think that these mandates will start to ease up, guys.
Ronnie, thank you. Coming up on Talking Points, the largest banking crisis since 2008 has Democrats and Republicans pointing fingers and using new rhetoric. What does it all mean? Find out after the break.
Jordan knows he shouldn't eat this entire bowl of nachos, but tonight he's earned that right. Because a few hours ago, in the middle of happy hour, he recognized a sign. Not from the gods or a bolt of lightning, but from a double heart, a kissy face, and a fourth ha in ha ha ha. That's when Jordan knew he was buzzed. So when it was time to go, he got a ride home instead of driving. Be a legend like Jordan. Recognize your buzzed warning signs and get a ride home. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
Welcome back to Talking Points. Many Republican politicians have rallied against, quote, wokeness in recent months, including in the aftermath of the largest bank collapse since 2008. Talking Points analyst Luke Radel followed Republican rhetoric on this issue. Luke?
Thank you, Chile and Jake. It's up for debate what this popular term actually means, but that hasn't stopped Florida Governor Ron DeSantis from assailing wokeness in Churchill-esque terms.
We say very clearly in the state of Florida, we will fight the woke in the legislature. We will fight the woke in education. We will fight the woke in the businesses. We will never, ever surrender to the woke mob. Our state is where woke goes to die. You can't just say, let it go, because then we're going to be living under an oppressive wokeocracy.
Now, if you're confused about what an oppressive wokeocracy is, you're not alone. According to polls, Americans are divided on whether woke is a positive or negative term, with 56% of Americans still finding it to be a good thing. But part of the reason why wokeness has become so ill-defined is because it has been used in situations that objectively have nothing to do with it. A recent example is the latest financial news. When Silicon Valley Bank collapsed earlier this month, many conservatives pointed to a predictable culprit.
It is a woke bank, despite what you said in the green room. They're very into this social justice investing stuff. They're all concerned with gender and everything.
I mean, this bank, they're so concerned with DEI and politics and all kinds of stuff. I think that really diverted from them focusing on their core mission.
Take huge, risky gambles on crazy woke projects, crazy climate projects, virtue signaling with no financial integrity, no financial soundness underneath, and this whole country is going to go the way of Silicon Valley Bank if we don't change direction.
So look, there's a lot of acronyms and buzzwords flying around there, but sticking to the facts, there is no evidence that DEI, climate change, social justice, gender, or wokeness caused the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank. And even some conservatives admit that these woke banks attacks are pretty thin, including conservative podcast host Ben Shapiro.
Is wokeness to blame for what just happened? No. I mean, wokeness actually is not to blame for what just happened. In retrospect, you look back at all the stupid woke crap that they were doing during the last 3 years, you're like, oh, it's because of the wokeness. No, that was a symptom of the fact that the money was cheap and easy.
Look, many conservatives are opposed to what they see as increased political correctness in the classroom, in the workplace, and on social media. Now, wokeness has become an umbrella term for progressive policies. But it's unclear if it'll be a successful political strategy of attack by Republicans. If wokeness is blamed for everything, including things that it has nothing to do with, it starts to become more of a catchphrase devoid of meaning. The point, Republicans will have to use their woke words wisely if they hope to take back the White House in 2024. Jake and Chile, back to you guys.
Luke, thank you. President Biden exercised his veto powers last week for the first time since taking office. The veto was used to protect retirees' rights to investing. After the veto was issued, the House fell far short of overriding Biden. Peter Barry is here to break down last week's events in D.C. And Peter, why did President Biden decide to use his first veto on this specific legislation?
So President Biden vetoed a measure that was narrowly approved by the majority in the House and the Senate. The issue is whether a Labor Department rule should take effect. Congress said it should not, while the President said it should. The rule allows money managers to consider climate change when investing retirement funds for their clients. The previous rule said money managers should only focus on maximizing profit when investing retirement funds for their clients. He also wanted to stick it to Republicans and that the environment is more important than profit.
And Peter, what does this veto mean for the future of retirement investments across the country?
It likely means that there will be more investments made in companies for renewable energy sources such as solar and wind. At the same time, companies who are involved in coal and gas are probably going to see fewer money managers invest in them on behalf of their clients. the Biden administration is going to continue to use the power of Wall Street retirement investments to combat climate change.
And Peter, the House was unable to overturn the president's veto. What's the outlook for that bill from here on out?
Well, for starters, it is very difficult to override a presidential veto, even though the GOP holds the majority of 222 seats. They need 290 seats to override this veto. They only secured 219, which is 71 short of what they needed. The vote was so lopsided, it didn't even go up to the Senate. It will be extremely unlikely for this to come back to fruition after a presidential veto, so it will most likely die on the president's desk.
Talking Points analyst Peter Barry, thanks for joining us. And coming up on Talking Points, the United States is in the midst of a major drug shortage. We'll break down the data behind it and how the issue can potentially be solved. Stick with us.
Hi, my name is Sadie Miller.
My name is Luke Brady. I go by St. Luke.
So this one I started with this guitar lick.
Stem is precise, no margin for error.
Dare to forget that. Dare to have fun with it. Get weird with it. Dare to send those old STEM theories flying past the neighbor's house into outer space. Dare to program something internet-breaking, record-breaking. Dare to blow their minds. Dare to learn the difference between sedimentary and metamorphic rock. Go find those rocks. Dare to keep daring. Dare to STEM. Check out She Can STEM to get started.
Welcome back to Talking Points. Drug shortages have become more common across the U.S. in the past decade. Just in the past year, we've seen up to a 30% increase of drug shortages, and it's only expected to continue to rise. Here to talk about this, as well as the long-term effect of what a drug shortage could cause, is Talking Points analyst Harrison Calder. Harrison?
Good evening, guys. So we have a lot going on with drug shortages recently. There's a lot of main reasons for why some of these things are happening, and a lot of it's with quality issues. We see manufacturing issues at 63%. You have raw material shortage at 27%. A lot of other smaller issues like loss of business production and increased demand, as well as drug continuation, that are all playing major parts of it. And then if you look on, you see the drug shortages per year. It hit its max in 2011, and it has slowly gone down and up, back and forth. So we see 2018, it was about 185, which is the most in that year, and it has continually gone down until last year, 2022, when it hit its highest point once again, and it is expected to continue to go up. It has gone up from 30% between 2021 and 2022. But the most common categories in this area would be emergency care. It's coming in at 87%, a huge amount, and obviously that's potentially fatal considering it is emergency care. You see anesthesia care, that's 85%. And if you look over here, pain management, that's 81%, and along with that is infectious disease. So a lot of these things could potentially be fatal to many different people and could cause a lot of problems with drug shortages. And here we have a quote from Senator Gary Peters saying even drugs needed to treat childhood and adult cancers, including some that have simply no alternative treatment, are regularly in shortage. And so while these shortages may only be an inconvenience, others have had devastating impacts on patient care. So there's a lot of problems with this and a lot of things that could happen potentially if we don't get these drug shortages fixed. And money has gone down with them. The price has gone down as well as the net price growth. So over time, that is continuing, and it seems that that will continue to go in that direction. Back to you guys.
So, Harrison, the U.S. is currently in a drug shortage, but what does the future look like for the pharmaceutical industry?
So there's a lot that could happen with the pharmaceutical industry. There's so many things that could be with the future. As we've seen it go up and down so much, there's no full guarantee that it will continue to rise or continue to fall. The trends are saying that it will continue to rise over the next year or so, and then as that year progresses, it will start to go down once again, once we see the issue, see what problems it causes and how big of a problem it is for us.
Talking Points analyst Harrison Calder, thank you so much. As lawmakers address the future of TikTok in the United States, Utah is going one step further, limiting children's social media use altogether. Interesting stuff here, especially with those hearings on Capitol Hill last week. Let's bring in Talking Points analyst Jacob Bernardini. Jakes, thanks for joining us tonight. The state of Utah passing a series of laws last Thursday that limited how social media can be used in the state. Can you break down what are these laws and how it's going to impact the rest of us?
So there are two specific bills going along with this legislation, one of which limits how children can sign up for social media apps. They need parental permission, And then the other thing is that they cannot access the app with a curfew from 10:30 p.m. to 6:30 a.m. And we might see this grow overall as the future goes along. Spencer Cox saying when he signed the bill that they're hoping to bring it to other states. They're hoping that the country, like the legislation, will go across the country. And we've seen some steps towards that. Several states have already proposed this in their state legislators. States like Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, Ohio, and New Jersey already have proposals in the works. So it could impact how minors can access social media going forward.
And Jacob, we mentioned the trial against TikTok in the House Energy and Commerce Committee. How are they defending themselves in this testimony?
So the testifying was, of course, 5 hours, and it was very interesting. And I think that we should hear what CEO of TikTok had to say during this entire endeavor.
Congresswoman, I have seen no evidence that the Chinese government has access to that data. They have never asked us. We have not provided.
Well, you know what?
I
find that actually preposterous.
Our commitment is to move the data into the United States to be stored on American soil by an American company, overseen by American personnel.
So we can see there that happened quite often during the questioning, lots of back and forth. It was almost like watching Supreme Court arguments. But TikTok has a plan called Project Texas, and what that plan is to move all data to Austin, stored by Oracle, which is an American company, and it would basically act as a quote-unquote firewall from Chinese corporations and the Chinese employees that work for TikTok. Now, currently, that data is still stored in Beijing, and it would cost $1.5 billion in order to get done. So it would be quite an investment, and it would take some time, and to be honest, lots of the congressmen and congresswomen weren't buying the entire project. They think that China will still be able to access the data and that overall it's a pointless venture by TikTok to try and get in good faith with the US government.
And Oracle being one of those companies that tried to get involved when former President Trump tried to ban the platform a few years back in his presidency. But with both of these new laws targeting the use of social media being considered on the state level and the continued push by congressional lawmakers to also ban TikTok on the federal level, how are big tech companies responding to this, and what challenges may some of these laws face?
Well, to be frank, a lot of these big tech companies don't think that there's any statement for this. They think it's a violation of First Amendment rights. That's what they're going to go and try and do in the court system. And last time they tried to ban TikTok under the Trump administration, the TikTok won in the court system. And also, there's a lot of concern about how these laws are going to be enforced. There has never been really a ban like this before. And we can actually look at the Chinese government as a good case study for this, which has a very restrictive internet. Lots of private citizens there still have access to these banned websites through a virtual private network or a VPN. That could become a very common thing here inside the United States if TikTok were to get banned.
Definitely, and I think there's a lot of people already talking about VPNs if there happens to be some ban down the line. Jacob Bernardini, thank you so much. And still to come on Talking Points, President Trump's indictment continues to be put on pause. We'll discuss the potential arrest and what it could mean for the political landscape next.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Here's to the straggly ones. The first ones. Hey, I look good with this ones. The black, brown, red, and gray ones. The itchy ones. The ones grown by Dad. The ones grown for Dad. The I nearly didn't do it this year ones. And the absolutely filthy ones. They all raise awareness, raise funds, start conversations, and save lives. Because whatever you grow will save a bro. Learn more at Movember.
Welcome back to Talking Points. Donald Trump could become the first former president to be criminally indicted any day now. Trump has been riling up his base since reports of a potential indictment from Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg regarding hush money payments to Stormy Daniels in 2016. Chile and I are going to break down that case right now. And Chile, I'll start. The first thing I want to mention here is the undying Republican support for Trump amid this potential indictment. And now, the thing I want to point out is this isn't necessarily the most political case. There is the January 6th case. There's the Mar-a-Lago documents case. Both of those much more political than this case, but still Republican leaders rushing to defend Trump and rushing to claim that this is a political attack. We saw Kevin McCarthy do it. We saw Nikki Haley do it, who's running against him. And we even saw Jim Jordan take to Twitter to do it in a tweet that said, quote, "God bless President Trump. Real America knows this is all a sham." So we're seeing that undying Republican support for former President Trump, excuse me.
Yeah, and Jake, I think it really shows that, those who are running against former President Trump still see him as a very big threat going into 2024. You would think some of these people got in a race thinking we need new leadership. We need to have former President Trump step aside and have somebody else try and take the reins of the Republican Party. But you see in instances like this where it may be easy to try and put the kibosh here and try and take Donald Trump out as a competitor for those candidates and what they are saying, you find them actually defending him, and you kind of wonder why you're kind of in the race at this point.
Yeah, and you mentioned that popularity that he still has even among Republican leaders. There was a poll by Marist today that said 56% of people said the investigation is fair. 6 in 10 Americans don't want him to be president again. Now, that was very partisan. 9 out of 10 Democrats and 8 out of 10 Republicans saying being in favor of the indictment or against the indictment. Still very partisan, but 56%, that's still 40% of America saying the investigation is unfair, and 6 in 10 Americans don't want him to be president again. That's still 40% of Americans saying that he could be president again, and they would be okay with that. So that's a little shocking to see just, after January 6th, after the documents case, after everything we've seen from Trump after the presidency and during the presidency, he still has that political capital.
And on that, right, I think it's interesting to see if this indictment happens here, if former President Trump is arrested, how this could possibly galvanize this race. Because there's a lot of people who support President Trump no matter what, and you have to wonder to see if they see it as what they called in 2016 a witch hunt, whether they see that happening again, and whether they're going to act as a result of that.
And that's all the time we have for you on this episode of Talking Points. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at CitrusTV News. I'm Jake Morel.
And I'm Chilekasi Adele. Good night.